Welcome to TRT World's continued coverage of the US election live from Washington, D.C. I'm Melinda Nusafora.
And I'm Jafar Hassan. Thanks for joining us for our last election special before we change gears and ramp up our rolling coverage ahead of Election Day on Tuesday. It is the home stretch here in the U.S. in the race for the White House, and both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are racing around the country in an effort to appeal to voters.
Well, on Thursday, both candidates had late nights with campaign events being held in the Sunbelt states of Nevada and Arizona. More than 65 million people have already cast their votes, beating the early voter turnout record, which was set in 2020.
Indeed, and the race still remains on a knife edge, and the focus is now switching to the Rust Belt. Harris and Donald Trump head to Wisconsin later today, and VP picks Tim Walz and J.D. Vance will appear in Michigan. So, in this show, we will be exploring the main issues in this election, as well as the Palestinian communities in America that could decide this race. But first, our headlines.
In Lebanon, at least 10 people have been killed in Israeli strikes on the town of Amhaz in the northern Bekaa region on Friday. The Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati has criticised Israel's expanded attacks on the country, saying they amount to a rejection of a potential ceasefire deal. Israel has struck the southern suburbs of Beirut for the first time in almost a week. 6 paramedics were killed and thousands in separate attacks on Thursday across southern Lebanon.
Meanwhile, Lebanon ceasefire talks continue. There has been no let-up in Israeli strikes in Gaza. Northern Gaza remains under siege, and Israel targeted the Nusayrat areas in the center of the Strip late on Thursday and overnight. Authorities there say many women and children are among the 55 people who have been killed.
The Palestinian Health Ministry says the second phase of polio vaccinations is set to resume on Saturday. The World Health Organization began a vaccination campaign in the Gaza Strip on September 1st after the enclave confirmed its first case of polio in 25 years.
In the occupied West Bank, a UN Palestinian Refugee Agency office has been destroyed during a raid on the Nur Shams refugee camp. Officials say Israeli bulldozers partially destroyed the UNRWA office, while Israel blames the damage on explosive planted nearby.
And in Spain, more rain is expected to fall as rescue workers desperately search for survivors after flash floods killed at least 205 people. Emergency teams are struggling to restore basic services in Valencia. The president of that region has announced $270 million of aid for those affected. But public anger is mounting over the apparent lack of warning about the scale of the floods.
Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have been campaigning in the western swing states of Arizona and Nevada. With just 4 days until the U.S. presidential election, Donald Trump was interviewed on a stage in Arizona by former Fox News host Tucker Carlson, where he made an appeal to evangelical voters and doubled down on his claims of voter fraud in 2020 election. Donald Trump confirmed Elon Musk is being lined up for an unspecified role in his administration, but ruled out a cabinet job for the Tesla billionaire. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris ended her speech in Las Vegas with an appeal to young voters and first-time voters and criticized Donald Trump's stance towards women and abortion rights. Polls are suggesting the race for the White House remains on a knife edge, but Donald Trump is predicting a landslide.
I think we're leading by a lot. And if we can keep that cheating down, because they're a bunch of cheats, if we can keep that cheating down, we're going to have a tremendous victory. I think it'll go down as one of the greatest victories of all time.
We all remember how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade. They did, and now 1 in 3 women in America lives in a state with a Trump abortion ban. Many with no exceptions for rape or incest. You know what? Let me say something about this. We're here because we're fighting for a democracy.
Well, we are joined now by our North America correspondent, John Brain, who is here in Washington, D.C. John, only 4 more campaign days left. Can we make a prediction at this point?
I think I'm not quite brave enough, Melinda, to make a prediction, to stick my neck out at this stage in such a tight race. I have to say, when you're outside the Washington bubble, though, my gut feeling would be Trump, because that's what you hear from people on the streets, that they like Donald Trump. But we just can't predict it at the moment. What I would say is that this contest feels less about a battle between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump as a referendum on Trump. A lot of people say they still don't really know Harris and what she stands for, but everyone in this country knows Donald Trump. Everyone really has got an opinion about Donald Trump. It's very hard to believe that at this stage there are any undecided voters left. So for both candidates, it's about getting their core support out. For example, Donald Trump has huge support among young men in particular. But if those men don't go to the polls on Tuesday and cast their vote, they're not much use to him. And that could explain the dark turn of phrase we've been hearing increasingly the last few days. Last night, for example, he called Kamala Harris a sleazebag. He talked about his Republican critic Liz Cheney having guns pointed at her face. He may be just trying to energize those supporters, get them riled up again so they do go to the polls. And for Harris, of course, her main strength is women, particularly support for reproductive rights. Statistically, women are more likely to go to the polls than men, so that could certainly be in her favor. One other thing to mention is that this could be a landslide, as Donald Trump points out, because if one of the candidates wins those swing states by just 1%, because of the winner-takes-all method they use here, then they could win easily. We'll have to wait and see.
With the US election just around the corner, Grace Kuria-Kanja unpacks the key issues shaping the Harris and Trump campaigns.
Now, the economy is the biggest issue to most voters. Inflation is at a 3-year low at 2.4%, but most Americans say that's still high. Kamala Harris promises to lower the price of groceries and housing costs on day one, while Donald Trump says he'll end inflation and make America affordable again. Trump also proposes tax cuts worth trillions of dollars in an extension to his 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that gave huge tax cuts to the wealthy. He says he'll pay for these cuts through higher tariffs on imports. Harris, meanwhile, intends to expand the Clinton-era child tax credits designed to ease the financial burden of having children. She also wants to raise taxes on big businesses and Americans making $400,000 annually. Another key issue, immigration, is also tied to the economy. Here's how. Trump intends to deport the more than 11 million undocumented immigrants and complete the border wall. But economy experts caution that could negatively impact the economy as most immigrants work in key job sectors. Deportation would also cost taxpayers billions. Harris plans to enforce border security and crack down on drug smuggling. She blames Trump for killing a bipartisan border bill that aimed to strengthen asylum standards and hire more border agents, immigration judges, and asylum officers. She intends to bring the bill back and sign it into law. Foreign policy is another major issue in this election, particularly with the war in Gaza. Now, both have called for it to end and quickly. Harris has been critical of the Israeli Prime Minister's failure to protect civilians in Gaza, while Trump positions himself as a firm supporter of Benjamin Netanyahu. On the Russia-Ukraine war, Trump says he will end the hostilities in 24 hours through a negotiated settlement with Russia. Harris has vowed to support Ukraine for as long as it takes, and when it comes to China's hegemony, she will ensure that the US and not China triumphs in what's been dubbed the competition for the 21st century.
Our correspondent Selena Downs is here in Washington, D.C. Selena, you're going to be heading to a women's march here in the Capitol on Saturday. What issues are really resonating with them this election cycle, and could women swing the outcome? Yeah, it's really interesting. John spoke a little bit about it at the top of the programme, and much is being made about the gender gap in this election, and with good reason. Women are 50% of the US population. They are the largest group of registered voters here in the US. They vote more than men. They tend to vote Democrat. They voted overwhelmingly for Barack Obama in 2008, 2012. However, when Donald Trump ran against Hillary Clinton in 2016, 41% of women voted for Donald Trump. So it's not enough to say that just because Kamala Harris is a female candidate that she will secure the women's vote. However, she is trending very well with women, particularly with that under 30 age group, that younger demographic, and that is largely down to abortion laws. She wants to restore abortion access for women right across America, a law that was changed under Donald Trump when he was president the first time, and we now see some states with very strict bans in place. She wants to restore access for women all across America, and that is resonating very well with women voters.
The power of women voters in the US is undeniable. Women now turn out to vote in greater numbers than men. Issues like inflation, the economy, and protecting democracy are playing on their minds in this election. Abby Littlejohn is voting for Kamala Harris.
The economy probably is the big ticket item. I think probably women feel the inflation and the economy just because of shopping and doing things like that.
But at this rally in Pennsylvania, women say they don't like the economic policies of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They say they were better off when Donald Trump was president because he put America first.
He actually resonates with so many people. He cares about our country. The economy is so bad. Bidenomics is not working. And I just feel like he cares about people.
Kathleen Crockett is undecided. She says rising inflation means many goods and services are now more expensive than ever. But she blames the pandemic, not the current or previous administrations.
A thing of milk is like $5 at certain store, like a gallon of milk. That used to be like $2, but it's $5. I think a lot of it was probably stemmed from the COVID because a lot of business, were closed and they're trying to make it up by increasing prices. So I think that had a bigger play into it than the presidency.
Abortion is another issue driving many women to the ballot box. Kamala Harris wants to allow abortion across the entire US, a law that was changed under Donald Trump. It's the #1 issue for women under the age of 30. Other women say they're excited by the prospect of a female president. Angel Livas says black female voices in particular have been historically ignored.
She understands Black culture, so she understands the things that are not only important to Black people as a whole, but specifically as a Black woman, and what those needs are that have not been met previously.
Women are the largest group of registered voters in America. Their support is key to winning the White House, and yet despite their voting power, women remain largely underrepresented in politics here. They earn substantially less than men, and childcare is unaffordable for many. Healthcare and the economy are the key issues facing women voters in this election.
More than 100 years after women won the right to vote in America, they could prove pivotal in this election. And they could make history all over again by electing a female president. Selena Downs, TRT World, Washington.
Let's unpack this further with Christopher Devine. He's an associate professor of political science at the University of Dayton. He joins me now live from Oklahoma. Great to have you here with us on TRT World. So we asked this question to our North America correspondent, John Brain, as well. But let me ask you the same thing. Is it possible to make a prediction as to who will win?
It's possible to make one, whether you be right. That's more up in the air. I think the safest prediction to make, although it seems like a dodge here, is that it's going to be close. I think the only thing that will shock people is if Trump or Harris wins in a landslide. I just don't see that coming. The forecasting models that seem to be popular, like 538, for instance, are tilting somewhat towards Donald Trump. So I think if either candidate has the edge, it's Trump, but it's very hard to predict.
Yeah, man.
We see a lot of headlines, Christopher, touting this as one of the most consequential presidential races in recent history. Do you agree with that assessment, and why?
Yeah, I think there's something to that, at least, and among other things. I should mention I'm actually in Ohio here, but among other things, we see that aftermath of the 2020 election, where in what's unprecedented, we had a candidate saying that the election was stolen from him, and has never to this point, Donald Trump, conceded that he actually lost the 2020 election. Given that there was not a peaceful transfer of power, but rather there was actually violence. There's some dispute over Donald Trump's role in that, but certainly many people feel like he instigated this, and that raises the stakes. So it makes people question, if he were to lose again, or if he were to win, actually, would he abide by the rules of the Constitution? Would he follow the law as president? By the way, he would also be the only convicted felon to reach the presidency. So in terms of these big picture issues of where American democracy goes from here, there's a lot of concern about whether Donald Trump will go along with that, or could actually change the character of American democracy.
Now, Chris, let me ask you, in the lead up to the election race, there's a lot of talk about violence and political divide within the United States. Is the U.S. more polarized now than it was back in 2020?
Yes, this is something that we can say clearly based on the evidence. As a political scientist, there are many different measures that we use to try to figure out how does where we are now compare to in the past. Look, if we focus on how members of Congress vote, how far apart Democrats and Republicans are, if we focus on how far apart voters, the American people, are on the issues, if we focus on how they feel about members of the other party, by all of these metrics, the United States is more polarized now than it has been in recent memory. I'm cautious to say ever. Some people will say it's most divided it's ever been. As a country that had a civil war in the 1860s, I don't think we've reached that point, thankfully, and hopefully we don't get there. But certainly in recent memory, this is the most divided the American people have been.
Let's head now to the swing state of North Carolina, where our correspondent Randolph Nogle is standing by for us. Hi, Randolph. We've been talking a lot about major issues in this election campaign. What is specific to the swing state of North Carolina where you are? What is it that's at the top of people's minds as they head to the voting booths on Tuesday?
Well, certainly before Hurricane Helene, it would have been the economy and inflation like so many places across America. But now for so many North Carolinians, it's about recovery from this massive storm, one of the worst ecological disasters in U.S. history. Certainly what we've seen in the last election in 2020 was a narrow loss in this state. Joe Biden losing this state and its 16 electoral votes by just 70,000 votes, which is really a margin of error. But since then, we've seen almost 500,000 people move into this state. That's largely thought to go the Democrats' way. But at the same time, registered Democrats have fallen and registered Republicans have risen. So it's really a wild card. But of course, as I say, another wild card in this is the economic recovery and some of the criticism that's been leveled at FEMA by Donald Trump, by the Republican National Committee, by that concerted effort to really paint it as a failed response. There certainly has been a reception here that it has been sluggish. I can show you that it is absolutely still recovering. If you look just behind me, you can see downed trees completely out of their roots. This was one of the most powerful storms in history. And if we just pan around here, you can actually see the Swannanoa River, which flooded its banks, and you can see in the distance there, excavators are still working. So a community here, just in Asheville, that is very much still recovering, and certainly for voters here, they feel like this is a very important election for them to vote, not only because it's about their economic futures, but also about the recovery efforts to build the infrastructure to get back to their normal lives.
Now, a powerful Arab American voting constituency is emerging in Arizona that could make the difference on which presidential candidate wins the White House. Arizona is a key battleground state, but there is a huge issue for the two main candidates. Their policies are pushing the growing Arab American vote in the state to the sidelines. Craig Boswell reports.
Amongst the cactus and olive trees, Mohyuddin Abdulaziz nurtures his garden and a growing political force.
We have the political power, and we're going to exercise it.
He's part of a coalition involving roughly 60,000 Arab American voters in Arizona, and the war on Gaza is the top issue.
With the Muslim vote, you can say, more about 100,000.
Those numbers matter. Joe Biden won Arizona by less than 11,000 votes in 2020, and the 2024 vote may be even closer. And listen to this.
We are not endorsing Kamala Harris. No vote, no endorsement of Harris. Of course, we're never going to vote for Trump.
How will the absence of tens of thousands of votes affect the presidential race?
If Arab American voters stay home or don't vote at the presidential election, that could definitely throw the election probably more towards Trump in the state.
All eyes will be on Phoenix, where a majority of Arizona voters live.
Phoenix, Arizona sits within Maricopa County. The county is the second largest voting district in the United States. About a third of registered voters here identify themselves as other, not Republican, not Democrat, and that makes this election outcome even more unpredictable.
Abdulaziz says the coalition is mobilized, but will only vote for candidates that will help end the killing of Palestinians.
The main goal is to end U.S. unconditional support to Israel. This is the beginning of a movement. It's not going to end whether Trump wins or whether Harris wins.
They're highly energized activists with hope. And as he puts it, activism thrives on it. Craig Boswell, TRT World, Arizona.
In the lead up to this campaign, Jaffa, you travelled to Michigan. So I'm just curious, after hearing Craig's package there, what's your take on it? Do you really think that voters are going to be assessing the US's involvement in the conflict in the Middle East as they vote, or are people really casting their vote on domestic issues, cost of living crisis, those sorts of things?
I think for the Muslim voting bloc here in the United States, foreign policy matters, and I'll tell you why. When I was in Dearborn, Michigan, I spoke with many Muslim Americans, Arab Americans, and whenever I would ask them who are they going to vote for, what are the issues they're going to vote for, the first thing that I heard from them was Gaza, Islamophobia, discrimination. So certainly what's happening in Gaza right now is going to dominate the ideology of this particular electorate. And apart from that, Melinda, I think we also need to underline here where these communities come from, which countries they come from. For example, in Dearborn, most of the Muslims living over there are from countries such as Palestine, such as Lebanon, such as Syria, such as Iraq, and all these countries are in a state of war except for Iraq right now. So this really goes to show how important U.S. foreign policy is for the Muslim community here in the United States. And, you know, we have been reading polls conducted by multiple organizations now. It shows that Donald Trump is leading over Kamala Harris, especially when it comes to the Muslim vote. But again, you know, 4 more days to go, things can change.
Yeah, it's interesting how the international issues do become domestic. Thanks, Jafar. Okay, well, as the US election approaches, the Red Sea is increasingly becoming a flashpoint for global shipping security. The Houthis have stepped up attacks on vessels that they say are linked to Israel, raising concerns over security and stability in the region.
Flames from an oil tanker light up the horizon off Yemen's coast. Just one of many ships targeted by Yemen's Ansarullah Houthi movement in the Red Sea. The Yemeni group, which controls most Yemeni provinces, says the attacks in the Red Sea are aimed at ending Israel's military assault on Gaza. The Ansarullah Houthis have carried out nearly 160 attacks forcing many ships to reroute around South Africa, increasing costs by millions of dollars.
Kamala Harris.
With no sign of peace, the U.S. is caught in the middle. No matter who wins the upcoming presidential election, the next administration will need a new strategy to protect free and open trade in the Red Sea, without risking a potential war with the Yemeni group that possesses hypersonic missiles.
As far as the Sana'a government is concerned, these attacks will stop only when Israeli aggression on Gaza ends and withdraws all military presence from Gaza.
However, with Israel intensifying its operations in Gaza and opening a new front in Lebanon, Ansar Allah Houthis has vowed to escalate their attacks against all Israeli-linked ships in the region.
If Israel escalates, we will escalate. These operations will not end.
The upcoming U.S. elections adds further uncertainty. Both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have outlined starkly different approaches to dealing with the shipping crisis in the Red Sea. Candidate Harris has indicated she will focus on ending the war on Gaza, disrupting Iranian armed routes into Yemen, and increasing the presence of U.S. military forces in the region. Trump will most likely relist Ansar Allah Houthis as a terrorist organization and impose more sanctions against Iran. Many Yemenis remain skeptical that either U.S. presidential candidate will bring meaningful change to the region.
It makes no difference if a Republican or Democrat wins. U.S. policy will remain the same, focused on advancing a neo-imperial agenda aimed at global dominance and exploiting natural resources.
With the U.S. election only days away, the future of international shipping in the Red Sea is approaching dangerous waters. Will the next administration part the seas of conflict or be sucked into the tide of regional war? Well, it's no longer just vessels bound for Israel that are being attacked. Now the Yemeni group is casting a bigger net at sea, targeting any ship that's had ties to Israel, past or present. Whether they're a ship that have flagged previously at an Israeli port or are affiliated to Israeli companies or Israeli businessmen, the message is clear. No ship with any Israeli connections is safe from attack. Yusuf Maudi, TRT World, Sana'a.
Now, South Africa is America's largest trading partner in Africa, with more than $25 billion trade volume. That's according to the U.S. Trade Representative data from 2022. However, there has been tension between the two countries after Pretoria took Israel to the International Court of Justice due to its close relationship with China and Russia, as well as the BRICS partnership. The economic ties between both countries are crucial, with potential for growth and mutual benefit. However, the outcome of this U.S. election is likely to have a significant impact on the future of this relationship. TRT World's Crystal Orderson reports.
This is Citrusdal, and it's the home of South Africa's orange industry. Gerard van der Merwe has been in the sector for the past 30 years, and he says the U.S. duty-free trade pact known as the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, saved his farm and thousands of jobs.
I think AGOA is something that's very close to our heart. I think from a Citrusdal farmer, it's the mainstay. We started exporting in 1999-2000, and I could remember 2000 was probably one of the worst years we've had in our life. So the USA has literally saved this valley.
The citrus sector employs close to 300,000 people, and it's a key contributor to the country's GDP, with the US being one of its main markets. The US says close to 600 American businesses operate in the country, and many use South Africa as a regional headquarters.
Please have a seat. Thank you.
The relationship between the US and Africa's largest economy has been cordial, but recently there's been tension.
South Africa has been scrambling to restore its relations with the US. American senators are uneasy about its BRICS partnership with the likes of Iran, Russia and China. The Biden administration and members of Congress have also criticized the country's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice.
The violence the Palestinian people are being subjected to
is a grim continuation of more than half a century of apartheid that has been perpetrated against Palestinians by Israel. We South Africans know what apartheid looks like. We lived through apartheid. We suffered and died under apartheid. We will not remain silent and watch as apartheid is perpetrated against others.
International experts say South Africa's government of national unity has brought an unexpected reprieve for the country.
The GNU has created like a honeymoon period for US-South Africa relations because they like the formation of the GNU. They obviously like the fact that the DA is involved and it's a party of pro-business and moderate views on foreign policy and so on.
However, there is uncertainty surrounding the future of AGOA under a Trump presidency, as his foreign policy decisions have been unpredictable. Fabricius says the Biden administration and most Democrats, including Vice President Kamala Harris, still value the relationship with the country. Back in the valley of Citrusdal, farmers like Gerard van der Merwe are confident that US-South Africa trade relations will survive and thrive. Crystal Audison, TRT World, Cape Town.
Jaffa, we've been doing this special coverage for quite a while now as we ramp up to the US election. I'm curious, what has stood out to you about this election campaign the most?
If I can describe it in one word, then I would say division.
Agreed.
I mean, I was surprised coming to the United States, seeing how divided this country is, Melinda, in the lead up to the election. When you talk to people here, you realize that there's no gray area.
It feels like a team sport, isn't it? It's like red or blue.
Exactly. So, I mean, it will be interesting to see what the outcome of this election will be. 4 more days to go. Things can change. Polls are showing a neck-and-neck race between both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Today, I believe they're both campaigning in Wisconsin. And it's a very important vote in Wisconsin. It's an important swing state. So, again, we'll be keeping our audience up to speed on all the latest developments coming out of Wisconsin. And with
that is all the time we have for in our last election bulletin from Washington, D.C. But it's only the start of our special election coverage.
Indeed, and in the lead up to Tuesday, we will bring you election specials and in-depth analysis of the implications of this election far beyond the U.S. borders. And then we will have rolling coverage once polling booths close on the 5th of November.
So be sure to tune in to TRT World. But for now, thanks for your company.
Bye-bye.